Good afternoon, Merry Christmas and welcome to the Analyst. Today we'll be taking up 5 newspaper articles from the Hindu and the Indian Express and discussing them. The first article is related to Pharma Sector, as the Department of Vigilance has asked the Delhi Health Secretary to withdraw all the substandard spurious drugs from the Delhi government-run hospitals. The second article is related to Maritime Security, as recently there were 2 attacks on 2 commercial cargo ships bound for India, one near the southern Red Sea and another in the Arabian Sea off the coast of Gujarat. The third article is related to drones in the context of internal security, as drones were used to drop cash and arms in Jammu and Kashmir near the line of control. The fourth article is related to the remission of duties and taxes on export products scheme, as the union government is planning to provide tax remission benefits on the export of sugar. The final article is related to Wrestling Federation of India, as the Sports Ministry has suspended the Wrestling Federation of India. Now, the first article is related to the pharma sector. The context behind it is that there were some substandard spurious drugs which were in supply in the Delhi government-run hospitals in Delhi, and the Directorate of Vigilance has asked the Delhi Health Secretary to withdraw these drugs from the hospitals. Earlier, the LGO of Delhi had also recommended a CBI probe in this matter. So we will be analyzing the pharma sector as a whole, the issues plaguing the pharma sector, as well as some suggestions regarding it. This is important in the topic Science and Technology in GS3. Now, first up, what are the issues plaguing the pharma sector? Often there is a supply of spurious drugs, substandard drugs. Spurious drugs as per section 17B are those drugs which are either a substitute or an imitation of an original drug, or they are manufactured under the name of a different drug. Whereas substandard drugs are those drugs which contain an adulterant or they fail to meet the required quality test. As per the report of the 54th Parliamentary Standing Committee on Chemicals and Fertilizers, there is a very low conviction rate in case the drugs are found to be spurious or substandard. For example, from 2015 to 2018, there were about 500 instances of spurious drugs, but it resulted in less than 5% or 6% convictions. Now, another issue is there is no law to recall the bad drugs in India. It leads to jurisdictional issues and enforcement issues. For example, if the drug inspector finds a drug to be spurious, then if the drug is manufactured in a different state, he does not have the jurisdiction to go to the state where the drug is manufactured and inspect the manufacturing facilities. Whereas the drugs are sold all over India, they can be manufactured in different states too. Therefore, there are legal issues. Another issue is the issue of fixed dose combination drugs. Fixed dose combination drugs are those which may contain 2 or more active pharmaceutical ingredients, and they are manufactured in a single dosage form. That is, a single tablet contains 2 or more pharmaceutical ingredients and the percentage of each ingredient is fixed. Now, they are manufactured by the manufacturers because it is economical to make a single tablet rather than 2 tablets containing 1 pharmaceutical ingredient each. Plus, it is beneficial sometimes for the patient also, because it is easy for him to remember the instructions from the doctor and there is adherence to the medicines which are prescribed. But it leads to various issues. For example, it becomes difficult for the clinician to prescribe an accurate regimen, and it may often lead to an overdosing of one ingredient and underdosing of another ingredient. And sometimes the drugs also have an adverse effect, and if in case the drug has an adverse effect, it becomes very difficult to identify which pharmaceutical ingredient caused that adverse effect. Therefore, that is also problematic in the case of fixed dose combination drugs. They are those drugs, for example, the Vicks Action 500, cough syrups, etc., which we often use. Another issue is related to e-pharmacies. E-pharmacies, for example, PharmEasy, Tata 1mg, etc., they sell drugs through online portals, online websites. Now they are competing with the brick and mortar stores. And in this intense competition, they often offer discounts also, huge discounts, and which leads to losses also sometimes. For example, even Tata 1mg reported losses upwards of 100 crore recently. And on top of it, they sell drugs without even checking the prescriptions. Even schedule H drugs, which cannot be sold over the counter through the brick and mortar stores, they are often sold through e-pharmacies. And because there is a lack of regulation, lack of rules which explicitly regulate the e-pharmacies in India, therefore there is a mushrooming of e-pharmacies. Also, we are heavily import dependent on active pharmaceutical ingredients. For example, penicillin G, for example, 7-ACA, for example, clavulanic acid. We are fully dependent upon imports, and we need to promote the domestic production of active pharmaceutical ingredients. There is antimicrobial resistance also, which plagues the pharma sector. For example, antimicrobial resistance means that when a drug is overused, it is overdosed, then the bacteria which is causing that disease, it becomes resistant to that drug, and in future that drug stops working, and drugs with higher potency have to be prescribed in future, and it leads to adverse effects. For example, the Global Research on Antimicrobial Resistance report reported that in South Asia alone, the antimicrobial resistant led to about 13 lakh deaths, and globally the figure touches about 50 lakhs. Likewise, there is another issue of the generic medicines. Often there is a nexus between the doctors and the pharmaceutical giants, and the doctors are not willing to prescribe generic medicines, and they prescribe costlier medicines because at times they get commission also from the pharma companies. Now, what are some suggestions regarding the issues related to the pharma sector? One, regarding the spurious drugs, we can implement the recommendations of the 54th Parliamentary Standing Committee on Chemicals and Fertilizers. The committee recommended the setting up of special courts to improve upon the issue of low conviction rate. Also, the committee recommended that the number of samples which are taken up for testing of the drugs, they should also be increased so that in future there are lesser instances of spurious drugs. We can also bring in a law to recall the bad drugs in India, the spurious or substandard drugs, the drugs which fail to meet the quality checks. It is there in US also. Regarding the fixed dose combination drugs, the Kokate committee outrightly called the idea itself irrational, or at least if the FDC drugs are approved, the approval mechanisms for them should be very strict. We can bring in the regulation of e-pharmacies. It was discussed earlier also. For example, the 172nd Parliamentary Standing Committee also recommended the regulation of the e-pharmacies. There were even draft e-pharmacy rules which were published by the government, but they have still not been notified. The draft e-pharmacy rules include the mandatory registration of the e-pharmacies, for example, Tata 1mg pharmacy, etc., and the prohibition of the sale of NDPA substances, the narcotic drugs and psychotropic substances, and Schedule X drugs, etc. There can be a prohibition on the advertisement of drugs, and the compliance has to be there with the provision of IT Act and IT Rules, IT Act 2000, and the prescription should be a must for the Schedule H drugs. They should not be sold without checking the prescription by a registered medical practitioner. Regarding the indigenous production of the active pharmaceutical ingredients, the PLI scheme can be brought in, the production linked incentive scheme, and it was also taken up with regard to 2 or 3 companies, pharma giants in India also. For example, the benefits were proposed to be given for Aurobindo Pharmaceuticals, for Karnataka Antibiotics and Pharmaceuticals Limited, etc. And further PLI scheme can be explored for giving benefits to the indigenous pharma companies for the domestic production of active pharmaceutical ingredients. Let's also look at the regulatory framework regarding the drug standards control in India. The central authority responsible for ensuring the standards and quality checks upon drugs is the Central Drug Standard Control Organization, CDSCO. Now, it is an authority which performs the functions assigned to the central government under the Drugs and Cosmetics Act 1940. What are the functions of CDSCO? Let's look at that. It approves any new drugs also clinical trials too, because any drug which is developed, usually it is tested first on animals and then there are clinical trials which are conducted upon a limited group. The CDSCO also is responsible for the import registration and licensing of drugs, and it gives licenses to blood banks, vaccines, rDNA products as well as some medical devices. It proposes amendments to the Drugs and Cosmetics Act as well as it notifies the rules under the Drugs and Cosmetics Act. It is also responsible for the banning of drugs and cosmetics which are found to be spurious or which fail to meet the quality standards. It grants the test licenses, personal licenses as well as the no objection certificates for the export of drugs, and it is responsible for the testing of new drugs. It is also ensuring an oversight as well as a market surveillance by ensuring the inspectorate of center over the state authorities which are there established in various states. Therefore, there is a need for a comprehensive overhaul of the pharma sector, including a new legislation which needs to be brought in for the regulation of e-pharmacies. Now the second article is related to maritime security. The context behind it is that recently there were two attacks on two India-bound commercial cargo ships. One was attacked in the southern Red Sea and another was attacked in the Arabian Sea about 200 nautical miles off the coast of Gujarat. This is important in GS2 as well as GS3 in internal security and international relations. Now, what is the need to strengthen maritime security in India? India has a 7,500 kilometer long coastline, a very long coastline, and 1197 islands are part of the sovereign territory of India. Also, India faces various maritime security issues, for example, illegal immigration, which comes from Sri Lanka, for example, in the state of Tamil Nadu, in the form of smuggling, for example, the smuggling of drugs through some ports of Gujarat coming in from Pakistan and West Asia, etc. In the form of terrorism, for example, the 26/11 Mumbai terror attacks. Therefore, to ensure national security, to ensure territorial integrity, maritime security has to be strengthened. Also, it is important for ensuring economic and energy security. For example, to ensure the success of India becoming a blue economy, to ensure the success of deep ocean mission, maritime security has to be taken into account, and we have to secure the sea lanes of communication. For example, 90% of India's trade by volume goes through the Indian Ocean, the foreign trade, and 70% by value, which showcases the importance of the maritime trade and its security. To ensure that the sovereign rights over the maritime resources are maintained, we have to check illegal fishing also, the illegal, unregulated and unreported fishing, etc. For that, we need naval power. Taking into account the geostrategic point of view, again, to ensure that India becomes the net security provider that it aspires to be in the Indian Ocean region, we need maritime security, we need to strengthen it, and to ensure the success of the Sagar Doctrine, that is security and growth for all in the region. We have a hostile neighborhood. For example, China is building bases all around the Indian coastline. Like it took the Hambantota port on lease for 99 years from Sri Lanka. It established naval base even in Djibouti, Africa. It is building like a string of pearls around India. Therefore, to ensure the security, maritime security of India, it has to be strengthened. Plus, there are regional conflicts in the region, around the Indian Ocean region particularly. For example, the conflicts in Yemen, Somalia, Iran, etc. Therefore, maritime security has to be strengthened. But there are certain issues which are plaguing maritime security strengthening also. For example, there is no formal definition. There is no commonly accepted definition for the concepts like maritime security, coastal security, etc. Plus, there are multiple institutions. For example, the Marine Police, the Coast Guard and the Indian Navy, etc. On top of it, there are multiple ministries also involved, which leads to a turf war and a lack of coordination too. How? For example, there is a proposal to bring in Coast Guard under the aegis of Ministry of Home Affairs rather than the Ministry of Defense also. It leads to a turf war. And the fishermen community, they are considered like the eyes and ears for maritime security, but they are also facing discontent sometimes. Usually it is due to the political interference in the fishermen issues, etc. Plus there is inadequate infrastructure. For example, we need more aircraft carriers for the sake of strengthening of Indian Navy. Plus there is shortage of manpower also, which is observed, and we are still dependent upon imports. There are a lot of components which are used in the aircraft carriers and drones, etc. They are still imported from other countries. Now, there are some steps also which have been taken up for ensuring the indigenization of the development of various arms, ammunition and equipments needed for the strengthening of maritime security. For example, the Indian Navy Indigenization Program Plan 2015 to 2030, it is to promote indigenization as well as to set up R&D and technical capacities in India. The Naval Aviation and Indigenization Roadmap 2022 to 2027 aims to indigenize various products, particularly the fast moving maintenance parts involved even in aircraft repairs, etc., which are also needed by the Indian Navy. And Naval Innovation and Indigenization Organization will serve like an interface between the academia and industry, so that the research activities which are done in the various academic institutions, they are also useful for the industry, for the domestic industry to develop the equipments for the Indian Navy. Now let's look at the mechanism for the maritime security in India also. We have a three-tier security grid. We have a coastal security scheme, as per which the marine police is responsible for the security up to 12 nautical miles from the coastline, and the Indian Coast Guard is responsible for this security. It provides security from 12 nautical miles to 200 nautical miles, that is within the exclusive economic zone of India. And the Indian Navy is responsible for providing maritime security beyond 200 nautical miles of the coastline. We have provisions for electronic surveillance, for example, coastal radar chain, automatic identification system, vessel traffic management and information system, etc. And there is a National Command Control Communication Intelligence Network. This is responsible for the fusion of information, centralized coordination among the information and intelligence agencies, etc. There is a Sagar Prahari Bal. Sagar Prahari Bal has been set up by the Indian Navy to protect the various naval bases around the coastline. And an information fusion center in the Indian Ocean region has also been set up. A center is set up in Gurugram. It is to ensure that the information which is collected regarding the maritime security, it is processed centrally. There was a multi-agency maritime security group also which was set up in 2021. This was again to ensure the coordination among the various agencies which are involved in ensuring the maritime security. Now India projects the Indian Ocean like an ocean of peace. But there are various competing interests, and as long as there are competing interests, there will naturally be conflicts. And maritime borders are not like land borders, because usually through land borders we can have fencing and they are usually bilateral disputes. Whereas the maritime disputes, they have to be settled in accordance with the international norms, international law, etc. And the economic well-being of the nation and the security at the high seas, they are inextricably linked. Therefore, maritime security holds paramount importance. Now, the next article is related to drones. The context behind it is that drones were used to hit cargo ships also in the Red Sea, and recently drones were used also to drop arms and cash near the line of control in Jammu and Kashmir in the Akhnur sector. This is important in GS3 in internal security. Drones are a threat to the internal security of India. For example, they are used by the terrorists to transfer weaponry. For example, what happened in 2021, the Indian Air Force base in Jammu was attacked using drones. Drones were used to drop improvised explosive devices. Likewise, in 2023, in Poonch also drones were used for the terror attack. Recently in Akhnur sector, again drones were used to drop arms and cash near the line of control. They are used for attacking the critical infrastructure also. For example, in 2019, the largest oil facility in Saudi Arabia was attacked using a swarm of drones. They are used for intelligence gathering too. For example, on the India-Pakistan borders, the number of drones which are sighted now, they have been increasing near the Pakistan border. Like in 2022, more than 250 drones were sighted flying near the LOC, whereas in 2020 there were less than 50 drone sightings. They are used to support organized crime also. The drug cartels, they use this as a modus operandi. They deliver drugs using drones. For example, what happens on the US-Mexico border? The Mexican drug cartels, they deliver drugs using drones. In India also, in Fazilka's bordering village in Punjab, recently BSF found the dropping of heroin by using drones. Then they are a challenge to anti-terror operations too. For example, the police and security forces, they are trained in the conventional methods to counter terrorism, whereas the usage of drones, that is a new method, and the conventional radar systems, they also fail to detect small flying objects. And usually what do security forces do? They just use eyesight to sight the drones and to shoot them down. Because if the conventional radar systems, they are calibrated to identify small flying objects also, they might start confusing birds also as drones, and it will lead to an issue. Now, what are the steps which have been taken to ensure the regulation of drones or to build the capabilities of India to counter such threats? One, we are importing various military drones from Israel and USA particularly. From Israel, we are importing Searcher Mark II, Heron II, Harpy and Harops. Whereas from USA, we are planning to sign a Predator drone deal also, as India intends to buy 30 MQ-9B UAVs, unmanned aerial vehicles from the US also, to fortify the drone capabilities of India. There is promotion of indigenous drone development. For example, Nishant was one of the first ventures of DRDO to develop a tactical unmanned aerial vehicle, and Panchi was the wheeled version of Nishant. And recently, with the development of Rustam 2, our capabilities have increased. Rustam 2 is capable of 18 hours of flying at more than 25,000 feet of altitude. It was also developed by DRDO. There are reforms in the drone sector in the civil side also. For example, the civil drone rules, it aspires to make India a global drone hub also in terms of manufacturing, services, repair, etc. To develop anti-drone technology, there have been many initiatives. For example, India is going to invest in counter unmanned aircraft systems. The counter unmanned aircraft systems are those which can either go for a soft kill or a hard kill of a drone. Soft kill means we just block the communication navigation system of the drone, so it loses its path and essentially it is killed. Whereas the hard kill means bringing that drone down by either shooting it. Also, the D4 systems were supplied to the army by the DRDO, that is drone detect, deter and destroy systems. DRDO also developed Aditya, the directed energy weapon. These are having electromagnetic systems that convert chemical or electrical energy into radiated energy. And they focus this energy on a target to cause physical damage. The counter drone system was also developed by DRDO, and it was used for VVIP protection also. For example, in the Republic Day parades of 2020, 2021, also when the US President Donald Trump visited India in Ahmedabad, the counter drone system developed by DRDO, that was used for VVIP protection. When we look at the contribution from the commercial side, Indrajal, a drone defense system has been developed by a domestic company, Green Robotics. Now, the next article is on tax on sugar exports and the scheme remission on duties and taxes on export products. The context behind it is that the union government is planning to provide tax remission benefits on the exports of sugar. Currently, it is placed in the restricted category. Now we are going to promote it. This is important in the topic Indian economy in GS3. Now, we will discuss about the scheme remission of duties and taxes on export products. This is replacing the erstwhile scheme merchandise exports from India scheme. because the erstwhile merchandise export from India scheme violated the WTO regulations. Therefore, the current scheme was introduced, and the current scheme remits duties and taxes incurred during the production and distribution of the products or goods which are going to be exported. It means that if the manufacturer has paid any taxes or duties during the manufacture of the products or during the distribution of the products to the government for the products which are going to be exported, he will be paid back those taxes. They will be remitted back to the manufacturer. This will promote exports, and the prices of our goods will become competitive in the foreign markets, and finally it will be earning India forex reserves also. Now, how does it work? It is based upon the allowed percentage of freight on board value of exports. Freight on board is a concept which is used in shipment. It defines the point in the supply chain where the liability or responsibility is transferred from the seller to the buyer. It can be freight on board origin or freight on board destination. Freight on board origin means that the responsibility for the goods will be transferred from the seller to the buyer at the point of sale at the origin of goods itself. That is, if any losses or damages are occurring to the goods during shipment, during transport, etc., the buyer will be responsible. Whereas the freight on board destination means that the seller will retain the responsibility or liability for any damage which is caused to the goods during the transport shipment, and the responsibility will be transferred to the buyer at the point of delivery at the destination only. Now, how does this scheme work? There are some transferable duty credits. Electronic scrips are issued in this scheme, and these scripts are maintained through a digital ledger which is maintained by the Central Board of Indirect Taxes and Customs, and there is a committee under the scheme remission of duties and taxes on export products. This committee works under the Department of Revenue, and it is responsible for reviewing and recommending different ceiling rates for different export sectors. And this scheme covers all the duties, taxes and levies which are imposed at the central, state or even local levels, which are not refunded through any other existing mechanisms. Therefore, it is a comprehensive holistic scheme to promote exports, to make sure that the products which are produced, manufactured in India, they are competitive in the foreign markets. Now, the next article is related to the Wrestling Federation of India. The context behind it is that the Sports Ministry has suspended the Wrestling Federation of India. This is important in GS2 in governance, and it can be quoted in GS4 ethics also as an example of misgovernance. Now, let's talk about the Wrestling Federation of India. It is the governing body of wrestling. It was founded in 1958 and it is based out of New Delhi, and it promotes wrestling players for Olympics, Asian Games, National Wrestling Championships and World Wrestling Championships. It has a contract system, the Wrestling Federation of India. As per the recent contract system for wrestlers, there are 4 grades under which they are paid: grade A, B, C and D, under which they are incentivized. Grade A offers 30 lakhs, grade B offers 20 lakhs, grade C offers 10 lakhs and grade D offers 5 lakhs to the wrestlers. But there are certain issues why this body is in news. One, there are allegations of sexual harassment against the erstwhile president of Wrestling Federation of India, as well as some national coaches, as some female wrestlers have come out in the open and they have been protesting since long. There are also allegations of financial mismanagement and arbitrariness under which the WFI is responsible. Also, recently it has been suspended from the United World Wrestling also. The United World Wrestling has suspended the membership of Wrestling Federation of India. There was an oversight committee which was set up this year by the government. It was headed by MC Maricom. Its report was not put in the open domain, but it was scrutinized and some major findings were later on revealed by the ministry. It revealed that there is no establishment of the Internal Complaints Committee. The Internal Complaints Committee, which has to be duly constituted under the Protection of Sexual Harassment at Workplace Act 2013, has not been constituted by the Wrestling Federation of India. Plus, there is inadequate awareness building. The measures which are required for the awareness building of the wrestlers, the stakeholders is not there, and the grievance redressal mechanism has also been deemed inadequate by the oversight committee. The oversight committee, although was disbanded soon, and there is a need for transparency and need for consultation with the stakeholders. The wrestlers and the stakeholders, they have to be taken into account when important decisions are taken. There has to be a democratic decision making, and there is a need for an effective communication. These were some of the observations of the oversight committee, although that was also disbanded later on by the government. Thank you.